let's just hop right into it.
Okay.
All right. I kind of want to start with, not kind of, but I do want to start with just your family, your upbringing, where you're from. So tell me, what was your childhood like?
So my childhood is an interesting thing because I see it in like these segments of time. I have like my early childhood when my parents were still together, and then there's this long bit of time after my parents divorced and the way that my life changed from there. But yeah, my childhood in before my parents divorced, it was my two sisters and I growing up with my mom and my dad in the home. My mom stayed home. My dad worked a construction job, and it was just we moved a lot. I went to a few different schools, lived in several different houses, mostly like in the Burien, White Center, just kind of all around that area.
How many schools do you think you went?
I've got, I always say 13, but it's probably closer to maybe just 10. But yeah, the transitions of school from elementary to middle is most people, they have three schools that they went to. I went to multiple schools halfway through school years. We lived all over Seattle, went to lots of schools in the Seattle area, South Seattle, and then Tacoma, Elma, Shelton,
Wow.
Tumwater, Hoquiam, Aberdeen. That's where I ended up graduating.
Yeah. Well, what kind of homes? What kind of homes did you live in?
When I think of home, I really think of Burien and my dad, and he pretty much stayed put in one location, one area. He was in one home for quite a long time. I feel like maybe 10, 12 years he stayed in one home in White Center. And so when I think of like going home or what that looks like, that's the idea that I first have. But then I have like the reality of what home was for me, and it was a lot of moving around. We lived in single wide trailers. We lived in big houses under construction and remodel. There was twice, it's kind of funny, just in the last couple of years, I've really come to the realization that there were 2 points in our life that I would consider living homeless at this point. When you think of people that are living on the sides of roads or in the woods in trailers with no power or no water and no sewer, we think of those people as being homeless. And if that's the definition of what that is, then I lived that twice in my life, living in the woods, in travel trailers, with no utilities.
What area was that in?
That was in Elma,
Yeah.
a little community called Lake Arrowhead. My uncle, gosh, I don't even know exactly how the story goes, but my uncle was in a bike gang. It was pretty cool. He was my favorite. But he passed away and left our family with a couple of lots out at kind of like a vacation community, people living, kind of out off the grid type place, but Lake Arrowhead out in Elma. And so we were out there for some time, and then came back to some of those lots that were undeveloped and lived, like I said, literally 2 travel trailers with blue tarps, pallets on the ground, going to the bathroom outside, going to the community center to take showers, and do laundry at my dad's house every other weekend.
Okay, so your parents were separated?
Yeah, that was after my parents divorced.
Yeah.
That was after my mom's couple of boyfriends and another marriage and that sort of thing. So we kind of bounced back and forth, living in regular homes and seeming like we were doing pretty well to crashing and burning and living back in the woods.
Mm-hmm. So tell me one story from your childhood, maybe two, but let's start with one that really sticks out to you. When you think of your childhood, one that really just...
Yeah. Are you looking like dramatic or experiences? So one thing about me that, it's funny because I've told this, a lot of my stories, and if you know me, not that it's defining who I am, and that's my, hey, I'm Cindie, and this is what happened to me as a kid. That's definitely not how I, come off. But people that have had the opportunity to sit and chat with me have heard some of these stories, and they're always just floored at some of the things that, my sisters and I went through as a child. Of course, every person has a different experience, and they may have a different perspective, but this is definitely the perspective that I have. But I was kind of the goody two shoes of the family. I decided to volunteer for a police department. It's called the Explorer program, and so I was a police explorer. I didn't want to do drugs, didn't want to lie, didn't want to steal, didn't want to cheat. Just kind of tried to do the right thing as best I could. And so I just spent my time volunteering for the police department for several years. And that was a really good set of people that I could be around that helped keep my eye on what family could be and what that looked like. But some of the stories, my mom met a man, his name was John, and it was when we were out in Elma at Lake Arrowhead. And he had money, and that probably enticed her wild appetite for adventure. And so she quickly married him. And I told my sisters that I thought he was chopping her up and putting her in the trunk of a car because I just had a bad feeling about the man. You know, you just get those feelings sometimes about certain people. And the flashing dollars weren't enough to make me happy. And so anyways, we moved around with him, but he was quite a wild character and drug addict, heroin, lots of crazy stuff, police raids on our house with search warrants, like you see in the movies, like your drawers are tossed out, your beds are flipped up, everything out of the cabinets and cupboards. I mean, literally digging holes in the yard looking for weapons and drugs and that sort of thing. My stepdad with camo gear and bulletproof vests doing drills in the middle of the night with shotguns, you know, us running into the woods in the middle of the night, hiding from him because he was on a binge. Those are some of the wild, crazy stories that I had at some points in my life.
Is there one particular story, whether it be good or bad, that sticks out to you that you can tell us?
Oh yeah, there's a lot. There's so many, but what just popped in my mind. At this point, we were living in Tumwater. The story I was just telling about the police, you know, searches and stuff and all of that was in Shelton. And then my mind just goes, like, I start thinking of like all these different stories. But we were in Tumwater, and my stepdad would go through these phases where he'd say, all right, girls, give me hugs and kisses. I'm going to go kill myself. And so we'd cry. You know, we were teenagers. You know, I was in high school by then, sophomore, junior. And so, okay, say goodbye, we're going to go. And so he was gone all night, and, you know, he'd return back a day or two later. And anyways, we were getting ready for school, and on the, you know, 6 a.m. news, King 5 or Como or whatever it was, man held himself hostage overnight at the VA hospital in, you know, Stillicum. And it was like my stepdad's truck on the news with his face blurred out. And anyways, it was just shocking. Like, oh my gosh, everybody's going to know that that's my family. Like, I was so embarrassed by it. I didn't want. Anyways, we ended up going to Western State Hospital where they admitted him and pumped his stomach and brought him back to life. And he ended up going to jail, I think, after that, but then came back home. But yeah, that was like such a crazy, wild experience to see a public display of my ridiculous life on the TV set. It was crazy.
Sounds like that was pretty regular.
Oh yeah. And it's kind of funny. There's like a detachment that I have. You know, some people are like, how are you normal? Well, I don't know if anybody's actually normal, but you know, you just have ways of coping and dealing with it. And so, you know, I detached myself, and I still probably do, in that life and it's almost like a storybook. Like, you know, when you read a story, you watch a movie, you invest in it and you feel, you know the characters, or, you know, you're excited about the story, and after it's finished, you're like, gosh, I wonder what happened. You know, whatever happened with that. That's kind of like my life. I look at it like that was a story or a really good movie or a book that I read or watched, and it's over. And I get to still live the life after, and so I know what happens to the characters. I see the end results. Like, my stepdad ended up being shot and killed by the police in Shelton on the front porch of his daughter's house, and that was the end of his life. And so knowing where people end up and the characters end up, you know, is the life that I'm still in. But that chapter and that part, you know, is over, and it's even retelling it is not even like it was me. It was like relaying a movie that I watched to somebody. So, yeah.
How do you think that environment shaped your personality or your outlook on life?
Well, you know, especially like having kids, there's a lot that people learn from their childhood, things that they want to do, things that they don't want to do. There was some good in my childhood. We rode bikes through the forest and picked huckleberries off of bushes, and I learned a lot. Even being with my husband, and I'll explain, oh, this is this, or this is what this means, and he's like, how do you know that? And it's just living this life of survival. You just learn things and learn how to manage. And so giving that knowledge to my kids and showing them, and not holding that against them, like, hey, I didn't have that as a kid and you should be so lucky. But there is that truth of making them aware and teaching them how hard it can be and how lucky and blessed they are to have this life. And so it's shaped me in a way that it's hard not to be a person that I don't want to be. So I don't want to be like my mom. And she has a whole story of, how she treated us too. And so she, as many people, may say, oh, she was a victim in this, but I don't believe she was a victim. She was, the perpetrator in a lot of this demise in growing up. And so me not wanting to be like her is a struggle sometimes, raising kids and getting frustrated, and but being able to hold steadfast in my beliefs of how to treat people is huge for me.
Anything else on how that shaped your current outlook on life? I don't know. I think that I see family as more chosen than given. Some people really hold near and dear that family is everything, and you live and die by your family, and you follow your family through all of the things. And I just don't believe that. I believe that you choose who your family is. And I have lots of family that aren't the typical family. They're not blood related. We don't share the same last name or, ancestry, but they're family more than anything. And so teaching, again, my kids, like, yes, that's, a family member, but that doesn't mean that they have to be your family, that your family is who you're around, who you choose. And so that's really shaped, a lot of my beliefs. Were there any family traditions, either with your mom or with your dad, that you still do to this day?
Yeah. So Thanksgiving dinner is a place where, so my mom and I didn't get along very well. My sisters and her got along much better than I did. I'm my dad. I look like my dad more. I'm just more like my dad. And whether she resented that or that I stood up more to her and didn't fear her as much as she probably wanted me to fear her. But what was the question?
Was there any family traditions?
Oh, family tradition. Yeah, I got sidetracked. Yeah, so Thanksgiving dinner. So one thing that my mom and I would do was cook. I could get in the kitchen and knew not to piss her off enough, and we could cook dinner. And so I could be her right-hand man. I watched and emulated the things that she would make. She was a great cook. She always provided food, albeit sometimes it was a little different, but she cooked really good meals for us. And